In the vastness between stars, where light itself grows tired and dies, a vessel drifted through the nothing. It was small by the standards of this galaxy, insignificant against the cosmic horror that sprawled across 1,000,000 worlds. The ship bore no markings that any human eye would recognize, its hull crafted from materials that bent shadow and starlight into patterns of near invisibility. Inside, a single occupant stood before instruments that pulsed with alien logic, scanning frequencies that mortal minds were never meant to interpret. The predator did not know where it was. The hunt had taken it far from familiar hunting grounds, through corridors of space that twisted and screamed with energies its people had no names for. What it had thought was a stable wormhole had become something else entirely, something that tasted of madness and whispered in voices that came from everywhere and nowhere. The transition had been violent, reality itself seeming to reject the intrusion, but the hunter had survived. It always survived. Now, as sensor arrays fed information into its biomask, the predator began to understand the arena into which it had stumbled. This was no ordinary sector of space. The electromagnetic spectrum sang with violence. Distress signals overlapped with battle hymns. Entire star systems burned with warfare so intense that their light signatures appeared as constant, angry red across every scanner. In its centuries of hunting across dozens of worlds, the predator had never witnessed conflict on this scale. War was not an event here. War was the natural state of existence. The hunter's mandibles clicked behind its mask, a sound of anticipation mixed with something approaching awe. Its culture valued the hunt above all things, and the galaxy before it promised prey beyond imagination. Thousands of worlds locked in eternal combat. Millions of warriors testing themselves against impossible odds. The predator's heart rate increased, biosigns indicating the beginning of the hunt reflex, that ancient drive that had carried its species across the stars in search of worthy opponents. It selected a target world almost at random, a planet designated in Imperial records as Kronos the Seventh, though the predator could not read such names. All it saw was a ball of ash and iron wrapped in the heat signatures of constant bombardment. Two massive forces clashed across its scarred surface, their weapons powerful enough to crack continents. The scale of destruction spoke to the strength of the combatants. Strong prey meant worthy trophies. The logic was simple, ancient, and absolute. The hunting vessel adjusted its trajectory, stealth systems engaging to render it invisible to primitive scanning arrays. As it descended toward the planet's upper atmosphere, something strange occurred. The sensors flickered, displaying impossible readings. Shadows moved across the displays, shadows that had no source. For a fraction of a heartbeat, the predator thought it saw something looking back through its own instruments, something vast and patient and eternally hungry. Then the moment passed. The reading stabilized. The hunter dismissed the anomaly as radiation interference or damage from the violent transition. It had no framework for understanding what had actually happened, no way to comprehend that in this galaxy. The warp touches all things, and nothing enters the domain of the dark gods unnoticed. The ship pierced the planet's atmosphere, surface temperatures rising to levels that would melt lesser metals. Below, continents burned, cities crumbled. Armies the size of nations threw themselves at each other with a fury that never diminished, never paused, never showed mercy. And descending into this hell, invisible and silent, came a hunter from beyond the stars. The predator did not understand yet. It could not know that in Warhammer 40,000, hunters were common. Predators were everywhere. And the greatest predator of all was the galaxy itself, a vast and grinding machine that consumed heroes and monsters with equal indifference. The hunt was beginning, but so was something else, something the hunter would not recognize until it was far too late. Kronos 7 was dying the way all Imperial worlds died, slowly and screaming, with every meter of ground purchased in blood and faith. The Predator's ship touched down in a ruined sector that had once been an industrial complex, now reduced to skeletal frameworks and craters deep enough to swallow tanks. Through the perpetual twilight of ash clouds and weapons fire, the hunter emerged, its form shimmering into existence only long enough to scan the immediate terrain before vanishing again into technological invisibility. The sounds of war reached the Predator from every direction. Not the focused combat of a ritual hunt, but chaos given voice. Artillery shells screamed overhead. Lost fire crackled in sustained bursts that suggested desperation rather than tactics. Something massive bellowed in the distance, a sound too deep and too organic to come from any machine. The Predator's biomask filtered and analyzed thousands of data points per second, painting a picture of a battlefield unlike anything in its experience. Movement to the north. The hunter's head turned with predatory focus. Through the ruins came a squad of Imperial guardsmen, their uniforms caked with mud and worse things, their faces showing the hollow stare of men who had seen too much and expected to see nothing ever again. They moved with the mechanical efficiency of soldiers who had long since stopped hoping for survival and now fought simply because stopping meant dying sooner. The Predator observed from the shadows of a collapsed warehouse, analyzing threat levels and selecting targets. These were clearly warriors, armed and dangerous despite their obvious exhaustion. The protocol was clear. Study the prey. Understand their capabilities. Then strike from advantage, taking the strongest as proof of superiority. It was the way of the hunt, unchanged for millennia. But something was wrong. The Predator's thermal vision showed that several of the soldiers were wounded, their body heat signatures irregular with fever and blood loss. Standard doctrine suggested they should have withdrawn or succumbed. Instead, they pressed forward, checking corners and maintaining formation with discipline that transcended physical capability. One soldier, his left arm hanging useless and clearly infected, operated his lasgun with his right hand while reciting something under his breath. The Predator's audio receptors picked up the words. Duty. The hunter did not understand religion in the human sense. Its people had codes and traditions, but nothing like the fervent devotion in that wounded soldier's voice. The man was dying. He knew it. And yet he continued forward, not toward escape but toward more combat, as if death in battle was not failure but purpose. The Predator dismissed the philosophical questions. It was a hunter, not a philosopher. It selected targets. The squad leader identifiable by his slightly better equipment and the way others oriented toward him. The heavy weapons specialist carrying a weapon that might actually pose a threat. And the wounded soldier because something in the hunter's code respected prey that refused to yield. The first strike came as the squad passed between two ruined buildings. The Predator dropped from above, wrist blades extending with a crystalline sound that was lost in the ambient chaos. The squad leader died without ever seeing his killer, body falling in two pieces as the hunter landed and pivoted in one fluid motion. The heavy weapons specialist turned, finger tightening on his trigger, but the plasma caster fired first, superheated energy reducing the man to ash and steam. Then the unexpected happened. The remaining guardsmen did not flee. They opened fire immediately, filling the space with lost fire despite having no clear target. They fought not with hope of victory but with absolute refusal to surrender. The wounded soldier charged forward, screaming prayers and firing his lasgun one-handed, and the Predator felt something it rarely experienced. Not fear but surprise. This prey did not behave like prey. It behaved like a cornered predator, willing to die if it meant wounding the hunter. The engagement lasted 11 seconds. When it ended, 5 guardsmen lay dead, and the Predator had vanished back into invisibility. By the standards of its people, the hunt had been successful. Targets eliminated, no wounds sustained. Tactical superiority confirmed. But as the hunter moved through the ruins, claiming trophies from the fallen, it found itself reviewing the combat footage stored in its biomask. The wounded soldier had died still firing, still praying, his last breath spent in defiance rather than fear. The Predator had taken thousands of trophies across hundreds of hunts. It understood courage. But this was different. This was not courage. This was something colder and more terrifying. This was faith that transcended survival instinct. In the distance, the war continued. Artillery thunder rolled across the shattered landscape. Thousands were dying every minute, and thousands more advanced to replace them. The scale of it pressed against the Predator's consciousness like a physical weight. This was not a hunt. This was an abattoir that stretched across continents, perhaps across worlds, perhaps across the entire galaxy. The hunter activated its cloaking field and moved deeper into the war zone, seeking stronger prey, better trophies, clearer victories. It did not yet understand the truth that was slowly crystallizing in the ash-filled air around it. In this galaxy, there were no clear victories. There was only war, eternal and absolute, and everything that entered its embrace was consumed eventually. The Predator hunted for 3 planetary rotations before the Imperium noticed something was wrong. Casualty reports showed anomalies that even war-numbed officers could not ignore. Elite soldiers found dead without clear cause, killed with precision that neither orc brutality nor Imperial firepower could explain. Bodies recovered with organs missing, wounds that suggested surgical removal rather than combat damage. An unknown factor had entered the equation, and in the grim calculus of Imperial command, unknown factors were threats to be eliminated. The response was not immediate. In a galaxy where billions died daily, a few dozen mysterious deaths barely registered. But Kronos 7 held strategic value, and the Lord Castellan was a veteran who trusted his instincts more than reports. He filed a request that filtered through bureaucratic channels for 6 days before reaching the right ears. When it did, the response was absolute. A single Thunderhawk gunship descended through the ash clouds. Its hull painted the deep blue of the Ultramarines, its prow bearing honors from 100 campaigns. Inside, 5 Space Marines stood in silence, their armor mag-locked to the deck, their weapons blessed and ready. They were not an army. They did not need to be. They were angels of death, and where they walked, the Emperor's enemies fell. The Predator first became aware of them through absence rather than presence. A section of the battlefield that had been thick with contacts suddenly went silent. No weapons fire. No communications. Just emptiness where moments before there had been life. The hunter's instincts, honed across centuries, recognized the pattern immediately. Counterhunters. Apex predators conducting their own stalk. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, the Predator felt the electric thrill of facing equals. It moved to higher ground, selecting a ruined hab block that offered sightlines and escape routes. The cloaking field would give advantage. Patience would reveal opportunity. This was the kind of hunt that defined a warrior's legacy. The Space Marines advanced in perfect silence, their sensors sweeping frequencies that the Predator's technology could not fully mask. Brother Sergeant Marius led, his centuries of combat experience reading the battlefield like a language. They had studied the kill sites, analyzed the wounds, and drawn conclusions. Xenos Hunter. Advanced stealth capability. Preference for ambush tactics. The profile was clear enough. What made them dangerous was not their equipment, though their armor could withstand firepower that would obliterate tanks. It was not their strength, though any one of them could tear through steel with their bare hands. It was their absolute confidence. They had been created for war, genetically engineered and psychologically conditioned to know no fear. The concept of a hidden predator did not inspire caution. It inspired systematic elimination protocols. The engagement began when the Predator fired its plasma caster at the trailing Marine. The superheated bolt struck ceramite armor and exploded, the heat sufficient to slag metal and vaporize flesh. The Space Marine staggered, his armor blackened and cracked, but he did not fall. Through the smoke, his helmet turned to pinpoint the source, and his bolter came up faster than anything that massive should be able to move. Mass reactive shells tore through the position where the Predator had been, each round exploding with enough force to pulp organs and shatter bone. But the hunter was already moving, years of experience screaming that remaining static meant death. It leaped between structures, cloaking field flickering from damage, while behind it the Space Marines advanced with terrifying coordination. They did not chase blindly. 2 Marines established firing positions with overlapping sightlines. 2 more advanced in bounding overwatch, each covering the other's movement. Brother Sergeant Marius held center, his helm's auto-senses filtering through visual spectrums until the Predator's heat signature became visible despite the cloak. His voice cut through the vox with cold precision. Contact confirmed. Xenos type unknown. Hostile and engaged. The hunt became a running battle through the ruins, the Predator using every trick its culture had refined across millennia. It laid traps with scavenged munitions. It used thermal camouflage to mask its signature. It targeted joints and helmet seals, searching for weaknesses in the legendary armor. And slowly, painfully, it began to understand that it was outmatched. The Space Marines did not tire. They did not make mistakes. They communicated in burst transmissions too fast for the Predator's translator to parse, coordinating their attacks with the efficiency of a single organism. When the hunter wounded one, the others adapted instantly, shifting formation to compensate. They learned from every exchange, their tactical doctrine evolving in real time. The end came in a ruined chapel, its walls still bearing faded murals of the Emperor enthroned. The Predator, bleeding from a dozen wounds and running low on ammunition, made a desperate play. It rigged an explosive trap and drew the Marines into a kill zone, betting everything on one perfect ambush. Brother Codissier Sulla walked into the trap deliberately, his psychic hood detecting the crude device before his boot touched the pressure plate. The explosion tore through the chapel, bringing down tons of rubble. In the chaos, the Predator struck, wrist blades piercing through damaged armor to find the flesh beneath. Brother Sulla fell, his primary heart pierced, his blood steaming as it met the air. It was a victory, a genuine kill against a foe that was supposed to be unkillable. But the cost was total. The remaining Marines opened fire without hesitation, without emotion, their brother's death simply tactical data to be processed. The Predator barely escaped, its cloaking field failing, its armor cracked, its body torn. It fled into the underhive darkness, carrying a trophy that had cost more than any in its long history. Behind it, Brother Sergeant Marius knelt beside his fallen brother, reciting the rites of the fallen. There was no anger in his voice, no desire for revenge, just cold acknowledgement. The Xenos was dangerous. Therefore, it would be destroyed. The logic was simple, absolute, and terrifying in its inevitability. The Predator did not sleep that night. Pain kept it conscious, wounds that would have killed lesser beings throbbing with each heartbeat. Its medical systems worked overtime, sealing lacerations and flooding damaged tissue with healing compounds, but some injuries went deeper than flesh. For the first time in its long life, the hunter questioned whether it had found prey beyond its capability. The underhive offered shelter at least. Kilometers of abandoned tunnels and forgotten chambers, layered beneath the planet's surface like geological strata of humanity's failure. The Predator found a junction chamber that still held power, its systems ancient but functional, and began the process of repair and recovery. Its ship was too far, the surface too dangerous. Down here in the darkness it could heal and plan. But the darkness was not empty. Something moved in the shadows beyond the hunter's thermal vision. Not footsteps, but presence. The air grew cold despite the geothermal heat that should have made these depths sweltering. The Predator's biomask detected temperature fluctuations that made no physical sense. Warm spots appearing and disappearing without source. Cold patches that dropped to near absolute zero in defiance of thermodynamics. Then came the voices. Whispers at first, so quiet the Predator dismissed them as audio artifacts or damaged equipment. But they grew louder, more distinct, speaking in languages the translator could not parse, and yet somehow the meaning was clear. Come, join. The words wrapped around the hunter's mind like fingers, probing for purchase, searching for weakness. The Predator activated its self-destruct sequence halfway, finger hovering over the final trigger. Its people had protocols for psychic attack, though they rarely faced such things. Better to die clean than live corrupted. But the voices receded at the gesture, as if whatever spoke recognized the hunter's willingness to die rather than submit. In the sudden silence, the Predator heard something else. Not cruel or mocking, but genuinely amused, as if some vast intelligence had just witnessed something entertaining. Above, on the planet's surface, things were changing. The cultists of Kronos 7 had always existed, hidden among the desperate and the damned, worshipping powers the Imperium could not fully suppress. They dealt in rumor and superstition and prayers whispered to gods that answered with damnation. And they had heard the stories. An invisible killer stalking the battlefields. A ghost that took only the strongest, leaving the weak untouched. To minds already twisted by warp exposure, the interpretation was clear. A divine executioner had been sent, a sacred hunter culling the unworthy. The cult leader, a man who had once been an Imperial preacher before truth drove him mad, gathered his followers in the burned-out shell of what had once been a temple to the Emperor. They knelt among ashes and drew symbols with their own blood, 8-pointed stars and glyphs that hurt to look at directly. Their prayers rose into the night, carried on currents that had nothing to do with wind. In the warp, the chaos god stirred. They did not often take interest in individual mortals, being too vast and too alien for such focus. But something new had entered their domain, something that resonated with aspects they valued. Khorne sensed a being of pure violence, a creature that killed not from need but from honor and tradition. Slaanesh tasted the exquisite perfection of the hunt, the artistic precision of each kill. Tisash saw a pattern disrupted, a new piece on the board. Nurgle alone paid little attention, for the hunter rejected decay and fought entropy with every fiber of its being. The predator felt none of this directly. Its mind was not built to perceive the warp's true nature. But effects manifested in ways it could not ignore. Shadows moved with intent. Blood refused to dry, staying liquid in warm hours after it should have congealed. Trophies began to whisper, the dead speaking with voices they never had in life. The hunter attempted to purge the corruption, burning the affected trophies according to ritual, but the wrongness persisted. Nightmares invaded what little rest its damaged body demanded, visions of hunts that never ended, of prey that became predator, of being flayed and remade into something that served appetites it could not comprehend. A week passed. The predator healed slowly, its metabolism fighting not just physical wounds but spiritual contamination it had no framework to understand. It ventured deeper into the underhive, hunting the mutants and criminals that dwelled in the eternal dark, relearning confidence through successful kills. But each hunt felt tainted now. The prey was too easy or too hard. Blood took on colors it should not have. And always, there was the sensation of being watched by something that existed behind reality itself. The cultists grew bolder, leaving offerings at the sites of the predator's kills. Weapons engraved with chaos iconography, armor inscribed with prayers to the blood god, captured victims bound and waiting, sacrifices to the hunter they had declared divine. The predator destroyed these offerings, recognizing corruption even if it did not understand the source. But the cultists interpreted the refusal as holy rejection, proof that the executioner deemed them unworthy. Then came the demons. Not in force, for the veil between reality and the warp was still strong on Kronos 7, but in whispers and glimpses. Blood letters manifesting as red shadows in steam. Horrors giggling in empty corridors. Demonettes leaving claw marks in metal that slowly bled. They did not attack directly. They tested, prodded, searched for openings. The predator killed one, a lesser demon of Khorne that had grown solid enough to bleed. The fight was brutal and confused, the hunter's weapons barely affecting the creature until a lucky strike severed something vital. The demon dissolved into ichor and smoke, screaming promises and threats in equal measure. But it did not die. The predator understood enough to know that. It had simply been banished, sent back to whatever hell had birthed it. The trophy taken from that kill pulsed with its own heartbeat. The predator stared at it for a long time, mandibles clicking in an expression its species used to convey deep unease. This galaxy was wrong. Not just dangerous, but fundamentally antithetical to natural law. Physics bent. Death was negotiable. And something vast and patient was trying to claim the hunter for purposes it could not begin to imagine. For the second time in its life, the predator considered retreating. Not from fear, but from recognition that some environments were too hostile even for apex predators. But its ship was damaged, its knowledge of local space limited, and everywhere it looked, the galaxy burned with the same wrongness. There was no escape route visible, only deeper commitment to the hunt or surrender. The hunter chose the hunt. It always chose the hunt. But now it understood that victory was not guaranteed, and survival was the best trophy it could hope to claim. The predator adapted because adaptation was survival, and survival was sacred. It modified its hunting patterns, avoiding areas where the wrongness was strongest, focusing on prey that showed no signs of corruption. The strategy led it to new targets, warriors who fought with faith rather than madness, whose deaths at least made sense within the hunter's moral framework. The Sisters of Battle arrived on Kronos 7 as part of a rotating crusade, their mission to purge heresy and restore the Emperor's light to faltering worlds. They came in righteous fire, their voices raised in hymns that pushed back the spiritual darkness, their weapons blessed to burn the unclean. The predator observed them from distance, analyzing threat potential and tactical capability. They were different from the Space Marines. Smaller, unaugmented, fully human beneath their armor. But they fought with a fervor that transcended physical limitation. When a battle sister advanced, she did so with absolute conviction that the Emperor would protect, that faith was armor stronger than ceramite. that death in his service was the highest honor. The Predator's biomask recorded acts of valor that defied tactical logic. Sisters charging into positions that should have killed them, surviving through what scanning systems could only classify as probability anomalies. The hunter selected its target carefully. Sister Superior Thessaly, commander of the Celestian Squad designated Ember Wing. She had survived 40 years of constant warfare, her armor bearing the scars of 1,000 battles, her face marked with devotion scars that formed prayers to the god Emperor. She was strong, experienced, and utterly fearless. Perfect prey for a predator seeking to prove itself against this galaxy's finest. The stalk took 5 days. The sisters moved in coordinated patterns, always maintaining sight lines and mutual support, their faith somehow extending their awareness beyond what normal senses allowed. Twice the Predator set up ambushes that should have been perfect, and twice Sister Superior Thessaly altered her route at the last moment, as if warned by divine intuition. The confrontation finally came in the ruins of a cathedral, its walls still standing despite the war that had consumed everything around it. The Predator waited in the shadows of the apse, cloaking field-active weapons ready. Sister Superior Thessaly entered alone, drawn by reports of Xeno's activity, her bolter blessed and ready, her faith a tangible thing that seemed to push back the darkness. She stopped in the center of the nave and spoke into the empty air, her voice calm and clear. "I know you are here, creature. I feel your presence like a cold wind. You have killed warriors of the Imperium, taken trophies from the faithful. This cannot stand. Show yourself and face the Emperor's judgment." The Predator remained still, evaluating whether the words were tactic or genuine perception. Sister Thessaly continued speaking, her tone not threatening but almost sad. "You hunt with honor, I think. The way you kill shows skill and respect for your prey. In another galaxy you might be called noble. But here, there is only one truth. You stand outside the Emperor's light, and that makes you enemy to all humanity." Something in the words struck deeper than they should have. The Predator had taken thousands of trophies, killed across dozens of worlds, and never questioned the righteousness of the hunt. But this human woman with her scarred face and absolute faith spoke to something the hunter had been feeling since arriving in this nightmare galaxy. The sense of being fundamentally wrong for this environment. The Predator decloaked, appearing like a ghost taking solid form. Sister Superior Thessaly's bolter came up instantly, but she did not fire. Instead, she studied the creature before her with eyes that had seen Xenos of every classification. Her lips moved in what might have been prayer or tactical assessment. "A hunter," she said quietly, "killing not from malice but from nature. The Emperor have mercy on us both." The fight lasted 30 seconds. The Predator was faster, stronger, and better equipped. But Sister Thessaly fought with something beyond mere skill. Every shot was placed with inhuman precision, as if guided by a hand greater than her own. Every dodge anticipated the hunter's attacks a heartbeat before they came. She should have died in the first exchange. Instead, she wounded the Predator twice, her blessed bolts burning like acid where they struck. The killing blow came from ambush within ambush. The Predator feinted high and struck low, wrist blades finding the gap between armor plates. Sister Superior Thessaly gasped, blood filling her lungs, her strength failing. But her eyes never showed fear. As she fell, her lips formed words the Predator's translator caught. "Emperor protects. Not me. Never me. But those I die to warn." The hunter took its trophy with ritual respect, acknowledging a worthy opponent. But as it claimed the sister's purity seals, something happened that had never occurred before. The Predator felt shame. Not for the kill itself, but for what the kill represented. This woman had died for something larger than herself. Her death had meaning within a structure of faith and duty that the Predator could observe but never truly understand. The hunter left the cathedral quickly, alarm sounding as the sister's squad registered her loss. But it carried more than physical trophies now. It carried questions. What was the purpose of honor in a galaxy that had none? What did victory mean when war never ended? The Predator had hunted to prove its worth, to claim status among its people. But here, individual worth dissolved into the grinding machinery of eternal conflict. In the days that followed, the Predator continued to hunt, but the joy had leaked from it. Each kill was efficient, professional, and empty. The galaxy had taught it a lesson that no prey had ever managed before. Sometimes victory felt like defeat. Sometimes survival felt like loss. And sometimes the hunter wondered if being prey would actually be simpler. High above, in orbit, the Inquisition fleet translated in system, drawn by reports of Xeno's incursion and possible chaos taint. The net was closing. The hunter did not know this yet, but it would learn, as all things in this galaxy learned eventually, that escape was illusion. There was only the war, and the war consumed everything it touched. The Inquisition did not announce its arrival. It simply began operations, deploying assets that had been honed over centuries of hunting threats to humanity's survival. Interrogator Vex, a woman whose youth masked decades of experience thanks to Juvenat treatments, studied the compiled reports with eyes that missed nothing. Unknown Xenos, advanced stealth technology, pattern killing suggesting intelligence and purpose. The classification was clear. Extreme threat. Termination authorized by any means necessary. She deployed 3 kill teams simultaneously. Alpha team composed of veteran stormtroopers equipped with auspex scanners tuned to detect thermal and electromagnetic anomalies. Beta team, Skitaria warriors whose augmetic senses perceived reality through Spectrum's flesh alone could never access. And Gamma team, her secret blade, a sanctioned psyker named Cray whose talent for precognition had saved her life more times than she could count. The Predator first became aware of the coordinated hunt when its ambush sites became death traps. Positions it had used successfully before were now pre-targeted by artillery. Routes it favored were mined with proximity charges. The enemy had studied its patterns, fed data into tactical cogitators, and produced probability matrices that predicted its movements with disturbing accuracy. The hunter adapted, abandoning all previous tactics and moving in randomized patterns that had no internal logic. But even randomness had patterns to eyes trained to find them. Alpha team pushed the Predator north. Beta team sealed east and west escape routes. And Gamma team waited where Cray's vision said the Xenos would eventually flee, his mind touching futures that had not yet crystallized into certainty. The first encounter with Gamma team nearly ended the Predator's hunt permanently. Cray felt the Xenos approach before any scanner registered its presence, his warp-touched senses screaming danger. When the Predator struck, expecting surprise, it instead found stormtroopers already firing at where it was going to be, rather than where it was. Only combat instinct saved the hunter, throwing itself into a role that sacrificed position for survival. Hell gunfire scorched the ground, superheated beams cutting through metal and stone. The Predator returned fire, plasma caster taking down 2 troopers before their armor could compensate for the heat. But there were always more. The Imperium's greatest weapon was not its technology or its faith. It was simple arithmetic. They had billions of soldiers. The Predator was one. The chase extended across Chronos 7's ruined surface, the hunter fleeing through sectors it had once controlled with confidence. Behind it, the kill teams advanced with mechanical inevitability, using Vox-coordinated tactics that left no gap unexploited. Sleep became impossible. Rest meant death. The Predator dosed itself with stimulants its biology barely tolerated, pushing endurance past safe limits, feeling its body begin to fail from stress and accumulated damage. Simultaneously, a different hunt was unfolding. Chaos forces, drawn by the cult's prayers and the scent of worthy prey, began their own operations. A warband of Khorne berserkers, veterans of the Long War whose sanity had been sacrificed on the altar of eternal slaughter, declared the invisible hunter a challenge from the blood god himself. To kill it would prove their devotion. To capture it would provide a gift worthy of demonic reward. The Predator found itself caught between fanatics who would not die and soldiers who would not stop. An encounter with the Khorne berserkers demonstrated the new horror of its situation. The Chaos Marines attacked with inhuman fury, Chinaxes screaming, their armor painted in layers of dried blood. The Predator wounded 3, strikes that should have been fatal, but the berserkers simply ignored damage that would have killed Space Marines, their bodies sustained by powers the hunter could not understand. Escape came at terrible cost. The Predator used its last plasma charges to trigger a fuel depot explosion, the blast wave massive enough to stagger even Chaos Marines. In the confusion, the hunter fled, its armor cracked, its weapons nearly depleted, its body pushed beyond endurance. Behind it, the berserkers howled prayers to Khorne, promising the hunter's skull for their god's throne. Interrogator Vex observed the incident through orbital picked feeds, her expression thoughtful. The Xenos was impressive, certainly, but also predictable in its desperation. She ordered all 3 kill teams to converge on the underhive entrance the creature had used previously. If it had hidden there once, it would likely return. Pattern recognition was not just a human trait. All predators became creatures of habit eventually. The predator reached its former shelter to find it compromised. Skitarii warriors had established firing positions, their augmetic patience allowing them to wait without fatigue or boredom. The trap was perfect, offering no retreat and no victory. The hunter pulled back but found Alpha Team closing from behind, their scanners finally calibrated to pierce the cloaking field through sheer brute force signal processing. For 72 hours, the predator did not stop moving. It crossed battle lines where orcs and guardsmen killed each other, using their conflict as cover. It swam through toxic waste channels that burned its skin but masked its thermal signature. It climbed the skeletal remains of hive spires, places so unstable that its pursuers had to slow down or risk catastrophic collapse. Survival became the only goal. The hunt, that sacred purpose that had defined its entire existence, became secondary to simply living another hour. Exhaustion brought hallucinations. The predator saw its home world green and living, so unlike this galaxy of ash and death. It saw its clan, elders who had judged its trophies and found them worthy. It saw hunts from younger days, when the universe made sense and strength guaranteed victory. The visions were cruel because they reminded the hunter of what it had lost, perhaps forever. Reality crystallized during a moment of weakness. The predator had taken shelter in a half-collapsed bunker, its body demanding rest that tactical sense said it could not afford. As consciousness faded despite stimulants, Kray's voice came through the darkness, not heard but felt directly in the hunter's mind. You are alone, Xenos. Alone in a galaxy that knows only hate. There is no escape, no rescue, no victory, only the choice of how you die. The predator's eyes snapped open, mandibles spreading in a gesture that combined defiance and acknowledgement. The psyker was right. The hunt had failed. Survival was temporary. But the manner of ending, that remained within the hunter's control. If this galaxy offered no escape, then it would at least witness one final hunt, conducted not from strength, but from pure unwillingness to surrender quietly. The hunter stood, checked its remaining weapons, and made a decision. If death was inevitable, then it would die as its people had always died, facing impossible odds with honor intact. The predator began planning not for survival but for legacy. One final target, one final trophy, one final proof that even in a galaxy of gods and monsters, a single hunter could leave a mark that would not be forgotten. The predator spent a full planetary rotation in preparation, using techniques learned across centuries of hunting. It salvaged what it could from the battlefield, cannibalizing Imperial and Orc technology with the desperate ingenuity of a creature that understood improvisation was now its only advantage. Damaged plasma caster was reinforced with power cell capacitors that would give perhaps 3 shots before catastrophic failure. Wrist blades were sharpened to monomolecular edges that would shatter after a single strike but would guarantee that strike cut through anything. The cloaking field, failing and unreliable, was jury-rigged to provide one final burst of full invisibility that would last perhaps 90 seconds. The target selection process was methodical. The predator analyzed every faction, every leader, every warrior of note within scanning range. It needed prey that would be remembered, whose death would echo through whatever records this civilization kept. The kill had to mean something, had to justify the hunter's existence in this galaxy even if that existence was about to end. The decision crystallized around a single individual. Captain Artis of the Imperial Fist's Third Company, a space marine whose service record read like epic poetry. 2 centuries of warfare, 17 major campaigns, countless minor engagements. His armor bore so many honor markings that the original yellow was barely visible beneath them. He was a hero in a galaxy that consumed heroes like fuel, and he had survived where thousands had not through skill, faith, and absolute refusal to yield. Captain Artis had come to Kronos 7 leading a relief force, his presence intended to shore up Imperial morale and provide tactical expertise to the failing defense. The predator observed him through long-range optics, studying movement patterns and tactical decisions. The captain did not hide behind walls or command from safety. He fought on the front lines, his power sword rising and falling with metronomic precision, each strike ending a life and pushing back the Xeno's tide. The hunter recognized a kindred spirit. This was prey that understood combat not as necessity but as calling. Captain Artus fought with the same purity of purpose that defined predator culture, the same focus that elevated killing from mere violence to art form. To die against such an opponent would be worthy. To kill such an opponent would be legend. The approach took hours of patient stalking. Captain Artus was never truly alone, always surrounded by his honor guard, protected by overlapping fields of fire and constant vigilance. But even the greatest warriors needed moments of solitude, brief windows when duty pulled bodyguards elsewhere, and the hero stood singular. The predator waited for that moment with the patience that had made its species apex predators across 100 worlds. The moment came during a tactical briefing when Captain Artus moved to the observation deck of a fortified command post to survey the battlefield personally. His honor guard remained below, coordinating with guard commanders. For 3 minutes, perhaps 4, the captain stood alone, his attention focused on the war outside rather than potential threats within. The predator activated its final cloak charge and moved like death given form. Every step was perfect, every breath controlled. The biomask fed combat stimulants into its bloodstream, pushing reaction time to absolute biological maximum. This was the hunt reduced to its purest essence, predator and prey, skill versus skill, will versus will. Captain Artus turned before the strike landed, some instinct or blessing warning him a fraction of a second before the wrist blade descended. His power sword came up in a guard that was too fast for unaugmented biology, parrying a strike that should have severed his spine. Sparks exploded where alien metal met Imperial steel, both weapons screaming in protest. For a heartbeat they stood frozen, warrior and hunter, separated by locked blades and divided by 10,000 years of conflicting evolution. Captain Artus spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Xenos hunter, you chose your prey well, but you should have struck from darkness. Now we meet as warriors, and I cannot fall here. Too many depend on my survival." The predator said nothing, having no language the human could understand. But its posture shifted, mandibles clicking in acknowledgement. This was the truth of the hunt. Words were unnecessary. Only action mattered. They fought across the observation deck, two masters of combat testing each other with strikes that would have killed lesser beings instantly. The predator was faster, its biology engineered for speed and precision. But Captain Artus had experience measured in centuries and faith that turned aside blows through what could only be called impossible luck. The power sword carved through the predator's shoulder armor, burning circuits and flash boiling blood. The wrist blade found gaps in ceramite, drawing transhuman vitae that hissed against superheated metal. Neither yielded, neither could yield. The predator fought with everything its culture had taught it. Every technique and tactic refined across millennia of selective breeding and brutal tradition. Captain Artus fought with the skill of the Adeptus Astartes, but also with faith, his lips moving in constant prayer, his certainty absolute that the Emperor would grant victory to the faithful. The end came simultaneously. The Predator's damaged plasma caster fired its final charge at point-blank range, the bolt taking Captain Artus in the chest and burning through even his legendary armor. In the same instant, the power sword completed its arc, severing the Predator's primary arm and carving deep into its torso. Both warriors fell, bodies broken, blood mixing on the deck. Captain Artus landed on his back, his armor's medical system screaming damage warnings. Through failing vision, he saw the Xenos collapse beside him, its strange mandibles clicking weakly. For a moment that existed outside time, they simply lay there, two warriors who had given everything and found the cost equal. The captain's honor guard arrived 17 seconds later, breaking through doors with weapons ready. They found their commander dying but conscious, and beside him the Xenos that had hunted Kronos 7 for weeks. The immediate reaction was to destroy the creature, but Captain Artus raised one trembling hand. "Wait," he whispered. "It fought with honor. Granted that much." The Predator heard the words through failing audio receptors. It did not understand mercy, but it understood respect. As consciousness faded, the hunter's last thought was simple. The galaxy had been cruel and incomprehensible. But at the end, it had provided worthy prey. For a predator, no better death existed. Captain Artis survived, though the wounds required months of reconstruction and would pain him for the remainder of his service. The Predator died on that observation deck, its body studied briefly by Mechanicus adepts before being incinerated according to Inquisitorial protocol. No Xenos technology would corrupt Imperial science. No physical evidence would remain. The creature became ash, scattered across a planet that was itself slowly dying under the weight of endless war. But stories do not die as easily as flesh. Within days, rumors began circulating through the guard regiments. Soldiers spoke of the invisible killer, embellishing details with each retelling until the truth became buried under layers of myth. Some versions claimed the creature was 3 meters tall. Others insisted it could phase through walls. Veterans who had actually encountered the Predator remained silent, their trauma too fresh, but their silence only fed speculation. The Space Marines recorded the incident with typical precision. Chapter archives noted the unknown Xenos species, classification pending, recommendation for future engagement protocols documented. Captain Artis submitted his report, clinical and detailed, but he added a personal note that was unusual for Astartes records. The creature fought with honor uncommon among Xenos. It sought challenge rather than slaughter. In another age, it might have been ally rather than enemy. The notation was flagged by chapter command and subsequently buried. The Imperium had no room for nuance. Xenos were enemy. The only good alien was a dead alien. But the words remained in the databanks, a quiet acknowledgement that even in a galaxy of absolute certainties, exceptions could emerge and leave questions in their wake. The Chaos cultists interpreted events through their own twisted lens. Their divine executioner had fallen in glorious combat, proving the blood god's favor through the perfection of the final battle. The cult grew in strength and conviction, attracting new members who heard the story and saw proof of the god's existence. Within a year, the cult would have to be purged by the Sororitas, their blood and madness adding yet another layer to Kronos 7's endless tragedy. Interrogator Vex closed her investigation with efficient thoroughness. Threat eliminated. No evidence of chaos taint in the Xenos itself, though cultist activity had spiked around its presence. She noted the creature's remarkable adaptation capability and recommended increased vigilance in case others of its species emerged. Then she moved on to the next crisis, the next threat, the next impossible situation that demanded solution through violence and faith. In the Underhive, scavengers found the Predator's shelter weeks later, drawn by rumors of advanced technology. They discovered a space picked clean by looters, but one item remained, missed by earlier searchers. A trophy taken from some long-ago hunt on a world whose name the galaxy would never know. It was simple organic, already beginning to decay in the toxic atmosphere. The scavengers left it where it lay, seeing no value in dead meat. The trophy rotted over months, returning to base elements, and with it vanished the last physical proof that a hunter from beyond the stars had walked among humanity's endless war. But memory persisted in forms that transcended physical evidence. Guard units began using the invisible killer as a bogeyman story to frighten new recruits. Space Marine training scenarios incorporated the creature's tactics as examples of adaptive Xenos behavior. On a dozen worlds across the sector, the legend spread and mutated, becoming whatever each culture needed it to be. Years passed. Kronos 7 fell despite all efforts to save it, consumed by an orc wog that overwhelmed the defenders through simple numerical superiority. The planet was declared perdita, lost to the Imperium, its population dead or enslaved. The battlefields where the Predator had hunted were buried under new layers of destruction, geological strata composed of bones and broken weapons. But somewhere in the void between stars, something stirred. Perhaps it was another hunting vessel, drawn by the same strange energies that had claimed the first. Perhaps it was simply gas clouds and radiation forming patterns that resembled ships. Perhaps it was nothing at all, just the galaxy's vast indifference manifesting as sensor ghosts and unexplained phenomena. Or perhaps, in a universe where gods were real and faith could alter reality, where the dead did not always stay dead and stories had power beyond simple narrative, the legend itself had become real. Perhaps somewhere in the darkness an invisible hunter stalked, not flesh but myth, not creature but archetype, eternally seeking worthy prey in a galaxy that would provide infinite challenge. The Imperium did not care about such philosophical questions. It had wars to fight, heretics to burn, aliens to purge. One mysterious Xenos defeated and destroyed was barely a footnote in records that documented billions of deaths daily. The galaxy ground onward, uncaring and eternal, consuming heroes and monsters alike. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But within that war, stories persist. Legends emerge from the blood and ash. And sometimes, when soldiers stand watch in the darkness and hear sounds that have no source, they remember tales of an invisible hunter that came from beyond the stars. They check their weapons, they scan the shadows, they whisper prayers to the Emperor. And in the silence between heartbeats, in the space between shots fired and impact registered, they wonder if somewhere out there, something is wondering the same thing. What new prey might this galaxy offer? What new challenges might test skills honed across centuries? What new trophies might prove worth the hunt, even in a universe where the hunt itself might be eternal? The galaxy provides no answers. It never does. There is only war, and within that war, infinite mystery, infinite horror, infinite possibility. The hunt continues, as it always has, as it always will, until the last light dies and the final shot is fired and silence claims even the legends. But that ending lies far beyond human sight. For now, the galaxy burns, and in the burning, stories are born.